Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another edition of World Talks here on TVP World. I'm your host, Benjamin Lee, and please join me and my guests on this next interview. An extremist group known as The Base has publicly claimed responsibility for the assassination of Ukrainian intelligence officer Colonel Ivan Voronich, who was shot dead in broad daylight in Kyiv last week. Now, funded in the United States, the group has grown into a transnational network with a record of violent rhetoric, recruitment of veterans, and suspected Russian links. What does this signal about evolving threats in Europe? Joining us today on TVP World is Rafał Pankowski, co-founder of the Never Again Association. Hello, sir, and welcome to TVP World.
Hello.
Now, this group called The Base have claimed credit for the assassination of a Ukrainian intelligence officer and also posting on various social media, quote, "This is just a beginning." And my question will be, how credible are these threads, or are we looking at another ISIS situation where terrorist group try to claim, quote unquote, credit for all the incidents that's happening across the world?
Mm-hmm. Well, in fact, neo-Nazism today is a global phenomenon. The Base is one of several such groups that are largely active online, but have also tried to organize and commit specific acts of violence in several different countries. It's a group that originated in the US, but then the founder moved to Russia, so it is also it also has a presence in some countries in Central and Eastern Europe. And well, some of the neo-Nazi far-right groups are siding with Putin's Russia in the war against Ukraine. And whether or not this particular group really committed the act of violence it is claiming responsibility for, we cannot be certain, but we can be certain where the sympathies of this particular offshoot of the global neo-Nazi movement is.
All right, so can you help us understand what is this group particularly, and how did it go from an American extremist group to now a transnational threat?
Mm-hmm. Well, that is important. Neo-Nazism today is definitely a transnational global movement. It may not be a mass movement, but it is a movement that is that is very much focused on its transnational international network. And it is not confined to this or that country. The point of reference for many of those groups is on the level of race rather than the nation. And that allows neo-fascist, neo-Nazi groups and individuals to cooperate transnationally in the name of what they consider, what they call the white race.
All right, now, like you mentioned, this is a transnational movement, and we're seeing neo-Nazi groups crop up in every country. But how does it operate specifically? Do you think that there's any sort of central command, or is it more like a fragmented movement at autonomous cells?
Mm-hmm. No, I think it's more of a fragmented movement, and of course, the internet provides a perfect tool for networking and for propaganda of white supremacy on a global scale, on a scale that's historically unprecedented. And a lot is to be done in the field of counteracting violent white supremacist groups online. I think nobody really has found the perfect solution to the issue. Within the European Union, we have the Digital Services Act, but also within the European Union, the implementation of DSA is still far from perfect. And the Base, the Nazi group we are talking about today, is in fact designated as a terrorist group on the territory of the European Union.
All right, now something I find quite curious, like you mentioned, these neo-Nazi group, a lot of them focus specifically on race rather than maybe an ideology or something else. Why do you think that they target Ukraine specifically? Is there any strategic value or motivation behind this attack if they haven't carried it out?
Hmm. Well, as I mentioned, the founder of this particular group has actually moved from the U.S. to Russia, so he's very open and outspoken about his support for the dictatorship in Russia and his support for the war against Ukraine. And I think this is the case with many of similar groups across the West and elsewhere. They actually admire the Putin regime, and many of them really admire the ideology behind it, the ideology of a strong man in charge, the ideology of so-called conservative values, which, as we know, in the case of Putin's Russia, is a radical ideology legitimizing imperial wars and the violence committed in Ukraine, and we know that protagonists of this kind of ideology, such as Alexander Dugin, they have a certain audience in different countries, including Western European countries, as well as they also have pockets of influence in North America. So this version of fascism actually, unfortunately, has some sympathizers on a scale that until not so long ago was difficult to imagine.
And after the assassination, they've also posted online that, well, quote, "This is just a beginning." What do you think they mean by that? And should the rest of the world be worried? Do you think that there might be any activities in Poland, for example?
Mm-hmm. Well, unfortunately, we also have homegrown fascist groups in Poland and far-right extremist groups that are currently actively mobilizing against migrants and refugees and minorities, and some of those groups are also quite well connected internationally. I would also add that violence. And hate crime is something that is inherent in neo-fascism. So ideology and hate speech in this case leads directly to violent hate crimes, and this is something that we are dealing with in Poland too. And I'm really afraid that in line with observations of the Never Again Association, we are witnessing an increase in the number of such cases of violent attacks against different targets, especially different minority groups in Poland.
All right. In your estimation, how influential do you think they are in these extremist organizations in Poland? You mentioned a lot of them have grievances with the migrant situation. Do you think that the majority of the people in the border that is organizing pushback against it comes from extremist group, or do you think that is probably still a minority?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think some of the far-right extremist groups are clearly instrumentalizing, certain issues around migration and especially on the Polish-German border today. They are manipulating and escalating this situation, utilizing it in their own propaganda. And what I think is relatively new in the case of Poland nowadays is the open racism that has been increasingly employed by far right activists and politicians who, for example, publish photos of African people, black people or people with darker skin color, publish those photos online, sort of implying that the very presence of people with a darker skin poses a threat to Polish culture and identity, which of course is absurd, but apparently it is the kind of hateful propaganda that has an impact, at least on a certain audience in Poland today.
All right, we have a very little bit of time, but really briefly, what do you think the traction is coming from, and why are these rhetoric gaining increasing traction?
Well, I think, it's a long story, of course. Historically, Poland was a very diverse and multicultural country. After World War II, it was a largely monocultural country, and for some people in Poland today, if they are faced with diversity, they are maybe disoriented and prone to xenophobic rhetoric. Some of instances of such rhetoric and disinformation around migration and refugees is of course amplified on social media, probably also from the side of Putin's Russia.
All right, thank you so much for your input and insight. Really appreciate it, and thanks for being with us on TVP World.
Thank you.
Cheers. And thank you for tuning into this edition of World Talks. But for more news, update, and commentary, please stay tuned to TVP World.